Some stories begin with a thunderclap. Mine began with a quiet knock and a sentence that turned my world on its side. If you've ever carried a truth in your chest like a stone in your pocket, always there, always heavy, you'll know the feeling that washed over me when my son stepped inside and finally said the words I never expected to hear. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was late afternoon, the kind that makes the curtains glow. My room smelled faintly of laundry soap and old paperbacks stacked on the nightstand. I just folded the last warm towel and laid it across the bed when the door clicked and he appeared, taller than I still remember in my mind, wearing that gray hoodie he's had for years. He didn't come in like a storm. He came in like a question. "Mom," he said, and his voice had a softness that made me set the towel down carefully, as if any sudden movement might startle the moment into hiding. He stood at the edge of the rug, hands tucked in his pockets, shoes leaving little half-moons of street dust. Behind him, the hallway light made a thin halo out of the dust motes drifting between us. We've had our seasons, he and I, sharp winters of silence and crowded summers of words. The last few months had been a cautious spring. He'd moved back home for a while, saying he needed to reset, and I'd pretended not to hear the worry under that word. Bills had their own way of scolding him, and the future had started tapping its foot. I tried to be his steady ground, even when my own felt shaky. He glanced at the chair by my dresser, the one draped with my sweater like a sleeping cat. I nodded. He sat. The chair made a small creak, a sound that was oddly comforting, like an old friend clearing their throat. His eyes found the photo on my dresser. Him at 7, gap-toothed, holding a paper kite he'd insisted would fly without wind. He'd made me promise to keep that picture right there so he could see the kid who never quits. I kept that promise. "I've been walking around with something," he began, fingers tracing the stitching on his hoodie, "and I'm tired of walking with it alone." The words slowed the room. Even the street outside seemed to pause, as if the traffic lights leaned in to listen. I folded my hands on the quilt, forcing myself to breathe in the rhythm I learned years ago, when life felt bigger than my courage. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. My heart obeyed reluctantly. He looked up, eyes bright and unsettled. "I'm scared," he said. Not defiant, not embarrassed, just plain honest. It landed in me like a bell. The last time he'd admitted fear, he was 10 and a thunderstorm had folded the sky in half. We'd counted together between lightning and thunder, waiting for the sound to lag behind the light. Now there was no gap at all. The sound and the light were the same. "I don't want to disappoint you," he added, and his mouth trembled on that final word. My mother heart did the reflexive thing. Rushed to reassure, to patch the crack, to say it's fine, it's all fine. But I held back. I remembered what it feels like to offer your truth and have it covered too quickly with blankets of comfort. Warm, yes, but suffocating. So I waited. The old clock on the wall took long, careful steps. He told me he'd been carrying questions about his path, about the person he was trying so hard to be versus the person he actually was. He'd taken a job he didn't love because it sounded impressive in other people's kitchens. He'd said yes to plans that looked good on paper and felt hollow in his hands. He'd smiled through conversations that left him feeling like a borrowed version of himself. He was tired of being fine. He wanted to be real, even if real came with awkward edges and unsteady ground. My breath tightened with relief and worry braided together. I had imagined so many darker possibilities. I had rehearsed speeches in the shower and prayers while stirring soup. But this was the fierce, ordinary bravery I wished for him when I first brought him home in a blanket that didn't quite fit. Still, I could hear the scrape of pride inside me, that little voice that wants to boast to the world. My son is doing great. Look how straight his lines are. Life, though, is more watercolor than blueprint. What if I change course? He asked. What if I let something go that everyone else thinks I should keep? His gaze flicked to the photo again, the paper kite. What if I fail in front of you? I moved only my hands, palms open on my lap, as if to show I wasn't hiding an answer, only making space for one to arrive. Sunlight slid across the floor and warmed the edge of his shoe. In that small, glowing square, I could see the boy who once declared that kites fly better when you stop trying to control the wind. He'd been right then. Maybe he was right now. You won't fail in front of me, I said carefully. You'll grow in front of me. Those can look the same on some days. The truth surprised us both with its steadiness. He exhaled, the kind of breath that shakes a little at the end, like the tail of a kite finding balance. He nodded, and then came the sentence that left me speechless, the one that pulled the hidden splinter of years past and set it on my palm. I don't need you to fix it, he said. I need you to see me. It was so simple and so enormous that language felt briefly too small. I thought of all the times I'd rushed a solution across the table like a life raft, not noticing he already had one, just needed someone to wave from shore and say, I see your boat. Keep going. For a long moment, we listened to the house breathe, the refrigerator's soft hum, the clock's devoted march, a neighbor's radio faintly rehearsing an old song. I felt the gentle tug of years, how they had thinned us and thickened us in uneven places, how they had taught us both to be brave in unexpected ways. I wanted to tell him that seeing him was my life's quiet work, that I had been practicing since his first cry. But the words sat heavy and sweet, and I let silence carry their meaning. He stood, the chair sighing again. Thank you, he said, and somehow it sounded like a beginning more than an ending. At the door, he paused and smiled, not the polite one, but the one that lifts from the eyes and forgives the world for being complicated. Dinner later? He asked. Later, I said. After he left, I picked up the warm towel from the bed. It had cooled just a little, but the heat was still inside it, waiting. I folded it along the seam, smoothed the corners, and placed it on the stack. Through the window, the light thinned toward evening, and somewhere a child laughed the way kites laugh when they finally catch wind. In that quiet, I understood that love, at its best, isn't a rescue. It's a porch light. And tonight, mine was on. The porch light settled into the evening, and with it my nerves. I set water to boil and pulled out the old cast-iron pan that remembers every dinner we've ever argued through and laughed over. When he said later, I didn't know if later meant 30 minutes or 3 hours. It turned out to mean the exact moment the garlic began to turn gold. He drifted into the kitchen with that careful quiet he uses when he's not sure which version of me he'll meet, the mother who solves things or the mother who listens. I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded toward the peppers. He washed them without my asking. It felt like a small treaty. We cooked side by side, our elbows learning each other's weather again. The radio murmured an old soul song that always makes me think of a borrowed pickup and a county fair, a life that could have been and didn't need to be. He sliced while I stirred, the room filling with a peppery sweetness and the promise of comfort. When the water began its soft storm, I poured in the pasta and set a timer I rarely obey. He caught me watching it and smiled like we shared the joke. Today at work, he said, I watched a man argue with a spreadsheet. He smirked and then sobered. He won, technically, but everyone lost an hour of their life. He leaned on the counter. I keep asking myself, If I do this for 10 years, who will I be? I put down the wooden spoon, not because the sauce needed me to, but because he did. Who do you hope you'll be? I asked. He didn't answer right away. The kitchen window showed our small backyard tinseled with dusk, the lemon tree wearing its stubborn green fruit like quiet medals. I want to make real things, he said finally. Things you can touch, or help people solve problems you can't click away from. I don't know which yet. I just know this isn't it. The timer sang. I actually listened to it for once. We drained and plated in the choreography we've repeated since he was tall enough to reach the bowls. At the table, the first bite did what first bites do, made us both a little kinder. He told me about a volunteer day months ago, how he'd repaired a sagging fence for a neighbor with a hammer that pinched his palm and still felt right. He told me about a weekend class he'd taken in secret, basic electrical, and how the first time a light turned on because of him, he stood there grinning like he was 8 and the kite finally caught wind. Why in secret? I asked. He rolled the pasta on his fork, the way he rolls thoughts. Because I didn't want to look like I was abandoning something everyone believed I wanted. Including you. He lifted his eyes. Especially you. The words landed carefully between us, like a cup set on a glass table. I thought about my own detours, the job I left when my mother got sick, the half-finished degree, the way people nodded politely when I explained and then looked over my shoulder for the more impressive version of me. I thought about the afternoon he came home with a drawing of a house you could fold into a boat, and how serious he'd been when he explained that sometimes a thing has to learn to be 2 things to survive. I believed I wanted it because you told me you did. I said, not accusing, just setting my own cup down. And I wanted what you said you wanted because it sounded like safety. But I don't want a safe stranger for a son. I want you. He exhaled a laugh that was only partly a laugh. We ate, and the radio slipped into a weather report that promised sun tomorrow like a gentle dare. After the plates were mostly clean, he pushed his chair back and rested his forearms on the table, hands folded like he was about to pray. I don't need a plan tonight, he said. I need a witness. Will you be one? I remembered the sentence from earlier. I don't need you to fix it. I need you to see me, and felt the hum of it through the floor of this moment. I will, I said. But witnesses sometimes ask questions. He nodded. So I asked the good ones. What brings you alive? What scares you kindly, the way a steep trail does? What would you attempt if success was measured in sleep and honesty, and the feeling in your chest at the end of a day? He answered slowly, like someone unpacking a box and deciding what to keep. He kept the part about working with his hands. He kept the part about helping, even if it meant being the least interesting person in the room. He kept the part about wanting mornings that made him feel like coffee already happened. He let go of the part about titles. When the kitchen finally cooled and the dishes leaned against each other to dry, we moved to the back steps. The porch light was a soft coin in the dark. Somewhere down the block, a dog held a conversation with the moon. He shoved his hands into his hoodie and stared at his shoes, then at me. There's something else, he said. The way he said it suggested we were stepping off a curb we hadn't seen. If I change course, it won't just be a different job. It might mean a different city. And he swallowed. I got an email this morning. I didn't expect it. I haven't told anyone. They want me to come for an interview on Friday. The night seemed to tuck itself closer around us, making a small, lit room out of the dark. I felt the old engine in me rumble to life, the one built to carry, to cushion, to say yes before the question finishes. I breathed with it until the idle became a purr. Tell me everything, I said, and he began. The porch light hummed above us as he explained the email in more detail. His words spilled out in cautious threads how the opportunity wasn't just any job, but one that could carve an entirely new path for him. It wasn't a glamorous corporate ladder or a title heavy with expectation. It was something simpler, closer to the ground, and more alive. The position was with a small nonprofit in another state, focused on rebuilding homes for families who had lost nearly everything. He would use his hands, his sweat, his mind, and his stubborn will to give people walls and roofs they could trust. I listened without interrupting, letting each word find its space in the cool night air. It wasn't lost on me that this was more than a change of work. It was a change of story. The son I once carried through storms now wanted to stand in storms for others. The boy who once asked me to hold the tail of his kite so he could feel the lift now wanted to help strangers feel the ground beneath them steady again. My heart swelled with two conflicting tides, the fierce pride of a mother and the quiet ache of loss. Pride because he was stepping into something brave and honest. Ache because it might mean I would no longer hear his footsteps upstairs or the familiar slam of the back door. He glanced at me, as if he could see the storm inside me. "I don't want to leave you behind," he said, his voice so low I almost mistook it for the creak of the step. "But if I stay just to keep things the same, I think I'll disappear." The honesty cracked something tender in me. I remembered my own turning points, the moments when staying safe had felt like shrinking. I thought about how often we, as parents, tell our children to chase their dreams, but quietly hope those dreams keep them close. I knew this wasn't about me holding on. It was about me learning to let go without breaking. "You're not disappearing," I finally said. "You're becoming, and I'll always be here to witness it, whether you're 2 rooms away or 2 states away." He blinked, and I could see the shine in his eyes before he turned his head toward the dark street. "I needed to hear that," he whispered. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that isn't empty but full of unseen threads weaving us together. The hum of crickets and the faraway whistle of a train filled the space our words didn't need to. I thought of how, when he was a boy, he used to line up toy cars on this very porch, making roads out of chalk that stretched farther than our street ever could. Maybe those chalk roads were preparing him for this moment, learning to imagine a path where none yet existed. When we finally went back inside, the house felt different. Not smaller, not bigger, but shifting, like furniture being quietly rearranged in the night. He lingered by the kitchen doorway, hoodie sleeves tugged down to his wrists. "Will you come with me Friday?" he asked, almost shyly. "Not to the interview, just to the city. I think I'll breathe better knowing you're somewhere nearby." The request landed like a soft stone in my chest, heavy and light all at once. It wasn't about dependence, it was about presence. About knowing that while he took the step, I'd be close enough to remind him he wasn't walking alone. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'll be there, even if all I do is wait in a coffee shop until it's over." His smile then was the same as when he was small, gap-toothed and fearless, though the teeth had long since straightened. He nodded, whispered good night, and climbed the stairs. The sound of his door clicking shut carried more than just routine. It carried trust. Later, when the house had gone still, I stood by the window and watched the streetlights flicker. My reflection looked older, the lines around my mouth more honest than I remembered. But behind them was a quiet strength I hadn't always believed I had. I realized that part of my journey was not just raising him, but raising myself into the kind of woman who could let her son fly without tethering the kite. That night, I left the porch light on longer than usual, not as a beacon to call him home, but as a symbol of faith, of presence, of a love that doesn't end where the road begins. And in that glow, I understood something that both steadied and unsettled me. The hardest part of love is not holding on, but knowing when to let go with grace. Friday came faster than either of us expected. The drive to the city began in a quiet car, the kind of silence that isn't empty but heavy with thought. He tapped the steering wheel lightly, a rhythm I recognized from when he was younger. He always did that when trying to settle nerves. The morning sun washed the highway in gold, and for a brief moment I thought about how many roads we had traveled together. School drop-offs, soccer practices, college visits, late-night drives to nowhere when talking was easier without walls listening. This road felt different. It was his. I was only the passenger now, and that truth was both humbling and beautiful. We found a small cafe near the building where his interview would be. It smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries, the kind of place that gives you courage without saying a word. We sat across from each other, him with a notebook he barely touched, me with a cup of coffee that cooled too quickly. His leg bounced under the table. "Remember when you told me kites fly better when you stop trying to control the wind?" I asked, reaching across to steady his restless hand. He smiled faintly. "That's today. You've done the work. Now let the wind do what it does." He looked at me, then really looked, and nodded. "I'll try." He stood, took a deep breath, and left for the building. I stayed behind, staring at the empty chair he just filled. A lump rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the moment for tears. It was the moment for faith. The minutes stretched. I watched people come and go, their conversations like fragments of other lives. Plans, worries, laughter, the scrape of cups on saucers. My son's life was shifting just beyond those glass doors, and all I could do was wait. Waiting, I realized, is its own kind of love. When he finally walked back out, I knew before he spoke. His shoulders were lighter, his stride steadier, and his eyes carried something new. Hope that wasn't borrowed but owned. He sat down across from me, the corners of his mouth tugging upward. "It went. Good," he said simply, as if the word itself carried 1,000 unsaid details. "Better than I thought." I reached for his hand, and this time he didn't pull away. "Whatever happens," I told him, "today you showed up for yourself. That's bigger than any result." On the drive home, he rolled down the window and let the air rush in, music filling the space between us. I didn't ask for details. He offered them anyway. He talked about how the interview felt less like an interrogation and more like a conversation about purpose, how he'd spoken honestly for once, not just recited lines meant to impress. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen, and this time not just by me. That evening, as we sat on the porch with the sky painted in soft oranges and purples, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You know, I was scared you'd think less of me for changing my mind about everything." I turned toward him. "I don't think less of you. I think more. Because it takes strength to admit when something isn't right. It takes courage to step into the unknown." He was quiet, watching the first star appear in the sky. Then, in a voice almost carried away by the breeze, he said, "I just didn't want to disappoint you." My throat tightened, but I answered with the truth I had been learning all along. The only disappointment would be if you lived someone else's life instead of your own. I'd rather watch you stumble toward joy than stand tall in someone else's shadow. The porch light clicked on automatically, casting a circle of gentle glow around us. It reminded me again of what I had realized before, that love, at its core, is not a rescue but a light. Not to drag someone back, but to help them see the way forward. We sat there until the night deepened, saying little but feeling much. I knew there would be more interviews, more choices, more roads that led him farther than I was ready for. But I also knew that I had done my part, not by holding him close, but by letting him know that no matter where he went, he would always have a home in my heart. As the crickets began their chorus, he glanced at me and smiled, a smile both grum and childlike. "Thanks for seeing me, Mom." And in that moment, with the world quiet and the light between us steady, I realized that being seen, truly seen, is the greatest gift we can give each other. My son had given it to me as much as I had given it to him, and that was enough to carry us both into whatever came next.